Hi there, it's Dr. Shiana Reams. I finally have my computer video working again, so I'm much happier with this particular setup than trying to use my phone. Works a bit better. So today is November 5th, the day after the elections in the U.S. On November 4th for 2025, in which the Republican Party took quite a beating. Lost all of the major races that they were looking at, and sometimes by significant margins. And I had a student, pose earlier today in class, ask, did Alexander ever face a shellacking? And my reply is yes, he did. There were several occasions where he faced pushback, either directly, indirectly, etc., both from enemies, but also internally. And I think it was really internally they were interested in. So it gave me my idea for what I would talk about for this particular week's video, is indiscipline in Alexander's army, and two events in particular, although as we'll see as I go forward, one of those events probably didn't happen, at least not as presented later in our Roman and Roman flavored sources. Which I've touched on this before, and in the series of videos I made at the very beginning discussing the sources and some of the issues with the sources, I need to remind viewers, okay, don't believe everything you read. And it can occasionally be tough to try to weed out and understand what might be later misunderstandings, later politics of the successor periods, that is, the folks who followed Alexander and all fighting among themselves, politics of the Roman era and how Alexander was used by Roman authors to project their own messages and images. So all of these things are overlays on top of the now lost original sources about Alexander. And even those original sources, remember, aside from whatever Callisthenes was sending home, these are all mostly from after Alexander's death, even the relatively recent, or the ones closest to him, by Nearchus or Ptolemy, etc., Aristobulus, things that Arrian is using. So yeah, Arrian's using those, but Arrian's writing much, much, much later. Okay. And Callisthenes' reports were shaded by what Alexander wanted to send home to Greece. So we're not really looking at any objective, if we could even use that term, account of Alexander's reign. And I keep harping on this because I don't know, first of all, how many videos some of the viewers have seen, but it's an important thing to keep in mind, which is a good reminder if you are new to the channel, or you stumbled across this video and you decide this is kind of cool, I want more of the same. Please subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy the video, please like the video. It helps to elevate it in the tsunami of various history AI options out there. All right, so let's take a look, first of all, at the mutiny, and I use the term loosely, on the Hyphasis. That's the one that occurred in India. There was a really good article that came out some years ago written by Sabina Mueller, who has appeared already on this channel, and Tim Howe, who was called Mission Accomplished, Alexander at the Hyphasis. I think that's the title. It's right here, so let me make sure I got it right. Alexander at the Hyphasis. And so this article makes a really, really, really good, solid case that it wasn't a mutiny, and not just because of a naming thing. Beth Carney came in, and Beth has also appeared on the channel. Beth Carney has argued that mutiny is a bad term and indiscipline should be preferred, and I mostly agree with her. But then Sabina and Tim came in and said, yeah, it didn't even happen. Or at least not like it is presented. And they do a very layered and insightful look at what was going on, and shoot down first some misunderstandings, and then some later presentations, chief of which is this perception of Alexander as world conqueror, which you start picking up even pre-Roman. But certainly by the Roman era, the Romans are using him as, okay, here's the guy who did it before us, Was he really trying to be a world conqueror, or is he trying to be king of Asia? What the heck did that mean? Is he trying to secure the prior Achaemenid Persian boundaries, which is what Tim and Sabina are arguing, and I think they're correct. Did he ever intend to go into India? Here I might differ from them a little bit. They say they don't think he did. I think he was just kind of sitting there and watching after the fight with Porus. I think he wasn't adverse to the idea of maybe going further. Much like his father Philip, I think that they planned things. They were very good at getting information, so they knew far more. He knew far more about India. Certainly by the time he had sat in Porus's kingdom and talked to him for a while, he had a fair knowledge of India. And so he's weighing options here. Do I think this is something I want to do? Do I want to go further? Do I want to push beyond Achaemenid borders? So I do think that did pass through his head. I'm not convinced that he never had any plans to maybe push further into India than the old Persian boundary, which is what he was establishing. But I also don't think that there was a concerted indiscipline, mutiny, whatever you want to call it, by the soldiers saying, no, we want to go home, and that this is a lovely Hollywood-esque fabricated event, and not understanding the boundaries that he set up and the altars, the ceremony, and this is fairly traditional Achaemenid stuff, and that he's reestablishing the boundary. He's going all around the edges of the Persian Empire after he's done there in Bactria, and he's gotten rid of Bessus and Spitamenes, and now he's going down into India, and he's reestablishing those borders as well. And I think looking for trade routes, running down the Indus, and then can I use water from the Indus to connect India back to the heart of the empire on the Tigris and Euphrates River. So that's a lot of what's also going on with Gedrosia. And so these things are later taken and they're embellished and they're turned into stories, either cautions like Gedrosia or frustrations. Well, he could have done it. He could have, gone all the way, but his soldiers forced him to turn around. Then maybe that's not really the story at all. But did he decide that we're in a monsoon season, the men are tired, they're irritated, they want to go home? Maybe I should call it quits. And also knowledge about just how big India is, which I don't think they knew going in, that he may have decided, this is a good place to call it quits. And not in an I'm defeated way, but in a I'm reestablishing the boundaries. Okay. And that all of this then turns into this story of mutiny, the officer-led mutiny in India. So I don't think that one really actually happened. Just like the tales of Gedrosia, him going into Gedrosia in order to, show up better than Cyrus, and no. No, there are very pragmatic reasons for all of these things that he's doing. And they're later mythologized, perhaps even in Alexander's own lifetime, but more than that, I think, by later authors. All right. So that then brings us to the real mutiny, the one that actually occurred at Opis. And this is in the spring of 324, and as I have written and talked about before, Alexander has two main periods where he does major revisions of the court. And there are other smaller things along the way. But one of those is after the death of Darius, unsurprisingly. He begins to adopt some Persian court ceremonial, sometimes wearing Persian dress. He adopts two seals, the Persian seal, the Macedonian seal. So he's essentially running parallel courts, right? This is another reason, besides just Sabina and Hugh Bowden's arguments, that they don't think proskynesis happened either. So surprise, there's another balloon busted. And I agree with them completely because it didn't fit. Okay, it was in the middle of nowhere, a really bad time to make some sort of major court changes. It did not match the other changes that he was doing, and so yeah, I think their arguments are sound. And I would also add to this that it doesn't make any sense in how Alexander was doing the court. So that, the mutiny on the Hyphasis, all of these things fit into a later narrative of megalomaniacal Alexander. That's who's the Romans. Okay. I don't think it fits Alexander. And I've said that several times. All right, now what is going on then at Opis? And it starts in Susa once they're returned back into the Persian heartland, and they stop at Susa, which is the administrative capital. Alexander arranges marriages, and he starts making yet more changes at the court. He includes in court procedure. Now you don't just have the silver shields, the former Hydas. I'm trying to make river names instead of unit names, but the silver shields were the protection of the king in combat, sometimes referred to even as the bodyguard in battle, and then the golden apple bearers are the same thing. They're the special unit of the Immortals, and he has 500s of each of them, so they're equal. They're in court ceremonial when he's holding full-on courts. He introduces Persian units into the cavalry there, and introduces a special unit of trained Persian boys, 30,000 of them, called the Epigoni, or the successors. Okay, and they're Persians trained in Macedonian arms, so the sarissai, and these are across several times. All right, they don't show up in Susa. I believe they show up at Opis, if I remember right. I'd have to actually go double check the sources, but all of these things are happening in relative short order across a couple of months. So this is the next significant change in court procedure. And what we are starting to see, if before we had two parallel courts running, what we are seeing now, okay, is a little more integration. Okay. There's the marriages I mentioned between the Macedonian men and the Persian women, Persian high-born women, Macedonian officers. He also encourages Macedonian officers who've taken up what amounted to common law marriages. Okay, here's formalizing it, and I'll even give you a wedding present. And spends a god-awful amount of money and gets them to formalize this so the children are legitimate. And so we're seeing a little bit more of this, and this integration of both the golden apple bearers and the silver shields guarding the king. So we have a Persian Macedonian unit. We now have Persian units, horsemen integrated with the Macedonian companion cavalry, not in former hipparchies. These are their own hipparchies, because you would need to give orders in Persian. So we're seeing a little bit more of this kind of integration. It's still not a brotherhood of mankind or anything like that, but he's trying to figure out how to weave this together, how to create this new empire that he's striving for. And the Epigoni are a piece of it, and they end up being the straw that broke the camel's back. We have several accounts of this mutiny and discipline, whatever, that occurs at Opis. Diodorus essentially says it's about the money, guys. Okay, maybe, not really. And then in Curtius, he gives a different reason. But I think it's actually Plutarch and Arrian who get it closest, all right? And this is something I argue in one of my articles in the recent Cambridge Companion to Alexander. And so I'm going to read you these two little accounts out of Plutarch and out of Arrian that talk about what happened, okay? And I'm going to actually start with Plutarch, although I think Plutarch embellishes toward the end. But the basics are described here, and he explains what happened. So this is at Opis. Where the heck is Opis? It's a little south of Babylon. It's basically where Baghdad is today. So he says, the 30,000 boys he had left to be trained and educated, and this was earlier, in the campaign some years prior, had developed manly physiques and handsome features and displayed remarkable skill and agility in their exercises. Okay? So Alexander himself was delighted with their progress. But the Macedonians were saddened and frightened by the thought that the king would pay them less attention. So when he sent the sick and disabled back down to the coast, they called it a foul insult for him to make the fullest possible use of people and then to discard them in disgrace and toss them back to their homelands and parents just because they were no longer the men he had recruited. They asked him why he did not send them all away and regard all Macedonians as useless now that he had these young blades to help him sweep across the world and bring it under his control. This made Alexander furious. In his rage, he cursed them thoroughly, dismissed his guards, and brought in Persians to do the job instead, using them to make up his units of bodyguards and attendants. When the Macedonians saw him being escorted by Persians while they were excluded and reviled, they were humbled, and after talking the matter over, came to the conclusion that they had been driven almost out of their minds by a jealous rage. Okay, and I'm going to stop there. He goes on for a little bit and talks about the reconciliation. And if you want to read it, this is Plutarch's Life of Alexander, chapter 71. So that's Plutarch. And again, Plutarch, he Hollywoodized it a bit. Then we get the account in Arrian. And again, I'm not going to, by any means, read the whole thing. Okay. But I'm just going to talk about them reaching Opis and the conflict between them. On reaching Opis, and in this, so you know, is 7, book 7, chapter 8, line 1, 2, and into 3. So, on reaching Opis, Alexander assembled the Macedonians and announced that he was discharging from the army all through age or disability were unfit to serve. He was sending them home, and he would reward them richly enough to arouse the envy of the Macedonians at home and excite their desire to share the same dangers and toils. Now, a side note, what Alexander's doing is giving them the proverbial golden parachute, but he's doing it with an eye to, y'all are going to go home. The other Macedonians at home are going to see how rich you are, and they're going to sign on to come out here and fight and get rich themselves. So that's Alexander's motive, or that's what he's thinking. You guys are old. You've served me well. Now go back and be the envy of Macedon. Alexander undoubtedly assumed his words would please the Macedonians because they've been agitating for a while. You know, we're ready to go home now. But since they felt they had already been slighted by Alexander and were considered useless in war, they were vexed yet again, and not unreasonably, by his words. Now that's Arrian speaking. He steps in and says, and not unreasonably. So that's Arrian's judgment. Okay. Throughout the whole army, the men had been exasperated on many occasions. So again, Arrian's editorializing. By now, they had often been pained by Alexander's Persian apparel, as it conveyed the same message, and by his supplying the Epigoni with Macedonian equipment, these Persian boys, Macedonian sarissai, and his inclusion of foreign cavalrymen in the ranks of the companions. We just talked about all this. Accordingly, they could not bear to sit silent, but began telling him to send them all home and to wage war by himself along with his father, referring mockingly to Ammon. Okay. And then Alexander, and we're continuing on here, Alexander was quicker to anger at that period, and in consequence of being attended in barbarian fashion, so once more Arrian's editorializing, was no longer as kind to the Macedonians as in the past. As soon as he heard the men's protest, he leapt down from the platform with his officers into the middle of it, okay, ordered them to arrest the principal agitators and pointed out to the shield bearers the men they should arrest, 13 in number. He commanded that they be led away for execution. Boom. Thunderstruck, the rest fell silent, whereupon Alexander again mounted the platform and spoke as follows. And then we get the big speech that is Arrian writing, guys. That is not what Alexander said. Just a reminder, but it's meant to be pissed off Alexander. Did he have the gist of it? Maybe parts of it. But let's take a look at what's going on here with these two accounts. The word that is translated there, slighting them, is huperoreo, okay, which means more than just slighting, to be the object of contempt. It's a harsh word. And this is what they are reacting to. Okay. So what is this all about? What is this mutiny, this indiscipline, this expression, this almost spontaneous? It doesn't seem to be planned at all. Alexander's clearly taken aback. Of rage. What is going on here? Guys, it's the ancient version of replacement theory. Okay? They're mad that the Persians, the people who they have defeated, not once but several times, are now being brought back into the empire, or given positions, that they're being given Macedonian arms. How dare he do that? How dare he treat Persians equal to us? We're better than you. We're better than Persians. We should lord it over you. And that's a lot of what they were frustrated about all along. Is Alexander's trying to make a working empire. They don't want a working empire. They want smash and grab, take the pretty toys and go home. Okay? Pretty much what happened in Persepolis. We want the shiny stuff and we want to murder you and treat you horribly because we beat you. This is typical of the ancient world, all right? I mean, they're not like unique in some way, okay? But that is the perception of how you treat the defeated. And this idea of Alexander setting himself up as some kind of new Achaemenid, okay, new successor almost of, he's using this title King of Asia. And again, that term is different from King of Kings. And they certainly knew what the title was. It wasn't that he's not using Shayathea because he doesn't know it. He knows that word. Okay. And the Macedonians in general knew a whole heck of a lot more about the Persian court than they are sometimes presented. This was not strange to them. They had been dealing with the Persians since Alexander the First. Okay. So Persian ideas and such were not foreign. They still didn't always understand it. And I think Alexander's burning of Persepolis is a classic example of them just not really getting it sometimes. But they understood the Persian. They didn't like it. Okay. They're mad. They want to continue to lord it over. Alexander, take your toys and let's all go home gloriously back to Macedon and kind of go back to the way things were. That is not going to happen. And so that's really what we see driving this indiscipline. And things do get smoothed over. Plutarch kind of lays it at the feet of the men. But in both of these accounts, what we find out, and I didn't read all of Arrian's is longer, Alexander replaces them. Okay? That's what you think I'm doing? Fine, let me show you what that really looks like. And he did. He replaced all of the bodyguard. We don't have the 500 silver shields anymore. He says, nope, I'm just having the apple bearers. I am going to be attended by Persians. Now, did he include the highest of the high? I mean, was Hephaestion kicked out of his tent too? And Perdiccas? I don't know. I kind of doubt it went that far. This is about optics. Alexander's trying to show them that you think I'm replacing you. Let me really show you what replacing you means. And then they bent. They gave in. He won. Okay. So Alexander ends up winning this confrontation with his own men, and he knew how to use. Again, we would call them optics. He knew how to use theater to get what he wanted. So that is the one of the larger cases of kind of insurrection, if you will, or indiscipline against the king, and an attempt to give Alexander shellacking that actually backfired in the end. And Alexander got exactly what he wanted. The men were eventually sent away. They still got their golden parachute, and he didn't punish them. But things went on exactly the way he had always intended them to. And that was the end of that in terms of any mutiny or indiscipline against Alexander. So we'll take up a different topic another time, but that seemed like a good one to do here once more. If you like the video, the channel, please subscribe, please like it, and help the algorithm. So I'll talk to you next time.